Today, I'm gonna show you how I created this cool scene with a budget of 0 credits.
Astrogation calculations indicate arrival in the Tatooine system in 42 seconds.
Great.
Shall I review the bounty profile before exiting hyperspace?
No, I know his kind. They're not hard to find.
Engaging this parrot indicates a 37% survival probability.
I like those odds. So the first thing I did was plan each shot. When you're working in CGI or with shots that are very VFX heavy, it's good to know exactly what each shot is gonna be in advance so you don't end up wasting precious time working on shots that you might not even use in the final edit. Professionals working in big studios often use something called previs, which is basically the process of making a rough plan of their scenes in 3D with digital animated sequences before they even start shooting. It is extremely helpful for directors because it allows to optimize filming, reduce costs, and figure out complex VFX shots before everyone arrives on set. For my scene, it's not really a big action sequence or anything. What's going on is pretty relaxed, pretty simple, so my planning comes down to this. I just wrote a sentence or so about what each shot would be, with some keywords about the cameras and the angles. Tight shot, close-up, wider shot, frame, out of focus, and that's about it for the planning. So for the environment, I already know that the totality of my scene is going to take place inside the cockpit of the Razor Crest. Now, what the professional filmmakers at Disney would do is film the scene in their full-scale set of the ship and project the environment of hyperspace on massive LED screens, primarily called LED volumes. So they're basically huge curved screens and ceiling panels that allow for in-camera visual effects. It's virtual production, and it is absolutely incredible because this means they're projecting the environments created in a 3D software on the screens so they can film with real-time digital environments. There are many major benefits to this method. First of all, they have total control on the environment. If they want to change the location of something, for example, move a mountain in the scene or whatever it might be, they can do it right away. Secondly, they save so much time because they don't have to relocate every time they shoot in different places. It also allows to shoot without the green screens, which is amazing because it pretty much guarantees great lighting on the characters right away. No need to worry about green spill on the keyed footage in post-production or anything like that. However, a setup like this costs millions, and I don't have that kind of money. I'm just a student with a free 3D software and a Creative Cloud subscription paid by my school. So I'm gonna have to use computer generated imagery, CGI. Alright, what I'm gonna do is go on a website called Sketchfab and download a 3D model of the Razor Crest. I will download it as a GLB file so it includes the textures. Then I will look for a droid. Okay, so for the droid, initially I wanted it to be IG-11, but I couldn't find a free 3D model of that specific droid. So I decided to download this free K2SO 3D model that I found on Sketchfab. Now, I'm aware that when it comes to the story of Star Wars, my scene doesn't really make any sense. Why would K2, who is a reprogrammed Imperial droid, be wandering around the galaxy hunting bounties with a suspicious-looking Mandalorian? I do not know, but tutorial mindset, fellas. So, I will download the droid as an FBX file, because I know that I'm gonna animate the model later. Now, it's time to open Blender and create the hyperspace environment. So to do that, I will add a cylinder put the cap fill at nothing in edit mode, select all the faces, hit F3 and flip the normals. Then rotate the cylinder, press Ctrl A and apply the rotation. Scale it and increase the length to match these settings. In the View tab, set the end at 10,000 meters to see the end of the cylinder. Then hit Shade Smooth. After, go in the Shading tab and move in the tube. Add a camera and make sure you are in render view. Then go to the world settings and change the color to black because space is dark. Select the cylinder and give it a new material. Delete the default principled BSDF and add an emission shader. Then add a noise texture and a color ramp in between. Play with the black color a bit and with the scale and detail settings of the noise texture node. Now press Ctrl T. It will automatically add the mapping and texture coordinate. Play with the X scale of the mapping node and the noise texture. Then add another color to the color ramp node, a nice blue. Also change linear to B-spline. It makes the transitions between colors a bit better. Add another black color to the color ramp and really tweak it to your liking. Then bring the emission up a bit and add a gradient texture. Ctrl-Shift-Click to preview. Add a Combine XYZ node in between and link the vector to the rotation of the mapping node. Click on the emission node to preview. Add a Converter Math node in between here. Change from Add to Multiply. Boost the value up a bit. Change the texture coordinate to the object. It will rotate more towards the center. And at this stage, you can really tweak settings and see what they do. So just put it to your liking. Okay, now we need to add the animation. Add an input value and press #frame. It will turn purple. When you press space, you'll see the value changing. If you open another window and look at the timeline, you'll see what's going on. Then add another Combine XYZ node, link the value to the x-axis and the vector on the location of the mapping node. Add another Converter Math node right here, change from Add to Divide, change the value of that node to whatever you want, something pretty low. And now look at that, a hyperspace tunnel. If we move outside the tube, we can see it's just the cylinder with a cool color animation. Now add a sphere. Put it somewhere at the end of the tube. Add a mirror modifier to it and select the tube. That will make it be on both sides. Then go to the Material tab of the sphere and add an emission node. Change the color and tweak it up until it looks nice and bright. Then I can import the Razor Crest model I downloaded earlier and put it inside the tube. Now it's very important for me to make sure I'm using the Cycles render engine because I want the lighting of my environment to interact with the objects I put inside. Here, I want the light of the tunnel to reflect on the Razor Crest and on the droid. Speaking of, I will now import the K2SO 3D model in a free website called Mixamo. I will then find a nice talking animation. This one is perfect. Then I will download it and import it in Blender. I will place the droid in the cockpit as if he was flying the ship. And since this is an FBX model, we need to link the textures. In my last video, I had no idea how to do it and ended up doing it all manually, which took forever. But I discovered a really cool shortcut. So, enable the Node Wrangler add-on in the preferences, then select the principled BSDF node of the part of the body you want to apply the textures to, then click Ctrl-Shift-T, find the textures of this specific part, select them, and then click Principled Texture Set to apply them. And there we go, K2 is looking nice in the cockpit. I also added lights to the scene and tweaked their settings to my liking. Now I will explain how I created the second environment, which is just space, for the last shot. So I opened a new Blender project, changed the world color to black, went to render view and turned off the overlay. Then I opened the shader, selected the world option and added a Voronoi texture node. I linked its distance output to the color of the background node. Then I increased the scale and placed a map range node in between. Put the minimum to 0.1 and the max to 0. Here change F1 to smooth F1, increase the scale value to 200, change the minimum to something like 0.5. Change the maximum value to 5 on the map range node. Now select the Voronoi texture and map range node and hit Shift D to duplicate them. Change the scale to 350 and the max to 2 here. Then connect it to the background node. Now add a math node in between here and link each result output to value. Then add another math node here before the background node. Change the type to multiply, add a noise texture, change the scale to about 10, the detail to about 20, connect the factor to value here and tweak the settings to your liking. You can then change the color of the background node to a light blue. After that, we can import a 3D model of the planet Tatooine, where the bounty is in my little story. Also, add a sunlight and adjust it to get a cool lighting on the planet and the spaceship. So that's it for the environments. Now let's move on to... So the hardest part about filming this scene was to get the lighting right. And that is because when you import 2D footage in a 3D software, the lighting of the environment is not going to reflect on the footage because, well, it's just a plane. So what I did for this scene was try my best to replicate the lighting of my 3D environment. I filmed in a basement and even put pillows in front of the windows to have a total control on the lighting of the room. No outside light. I then installed a couple lights. I placed a blue light on the left side of my helmet, your right, and a white light on the other side. Also, I made sure there was a decent lighting on the background. I then asked my Mandalorian mother to sit down and pretend that she was in the cockpit of the Razor Crest.
This is the way.
In the meantime, I made sure to move my hand in front of the blue light to make it look like hyperspace. Now, you might be wondering where the green screen is. To be honest, with the reflections on the helmet and this pretty dark lighting, I think getting a good result with a green screen would be very difficult. Lucky for me, there are many good alternatives to remove the background of my footage. I will be using a free Photoshop script created by the YouTube channel Creative Twins. It basically allows you to import an image sequence of your footage, set an output folder, and then it goes frame by frame removing the background with the built-in Photoshop background remover. It is very accurate and it does not take that long either. Then, when my footage is all ready with the background removed, I can import it as an image sequence in Blender with the Images as Planes add-on and place it in my scene as I want. I can then place cameras in the scene and render each shot as I had planned before. Also, it is important to set the focal length of the virtual camera to the same value of the camera you used to film your footage when placing yourself in a 3D environment. In my case, I filmed with my phone, a Samsung Galaxy S25, which has a focal length of about 24mm. But for the fully computer-generated shots, you can do whatever you want and just experiment. You can also enable depth of field to make your shots look more realistic and interesting. And now it's time to render. Wow, look at these shots. They look perfect. And that's exactly the problem. It looks kind of boring and just not real. This leads us to the next step. At this stage, my goal is to make the shots look more interesting and more realistic, like I'm actually part of the scene. So what I'm gonna do is open After Effects and import my shots as image sequences. Then I will do some color grading and add imperfection, like noise grain, lens flares, and lens blur. And also, I'm gonna put reflections in the windows, because if this was shot with a real camera, there would probably be reflections. So to do that, I can just create masks and place them as I want, add a bit of blur, and lower their opacity. When you're not filming on an actual full-scale set, and most of the imagery in your scene is computer generated, Compositing makes a huge difference. It just brings everything to life. When everything is too perfect, it can quickly become unrealistic to the viewer. There really is brilliance in imperfection. I hope you enjoyed the video or that you learned something today. If you have any ideas for my next scene or tips for me, please let me know in the comments. I just started my VFX journey. My goal is to get better here. Have a good day and thanks for watching. This is the way.